Black executive forced to use service entrance at conference. What happens next leaves CEO begging for forgiveness. Marcus Reynolds adjusted his perfectly tailored suit as the taxi pulled up to the gleaming glass facade of the Westbrook Convention Center. The International Tech Innovation Summit was the industry's premier event, a gathering where careers were made, deals were signed, and the future of technology was shaped. As the newly appointed Chief Strategy Officer at Horizon Ventures, one of the most successful Black-owned venture capital firms in the country, Marcus had earned his place among the tech elite through 2 decades of brilliance, persistence, and an uncanny ability to spot the next big innovation before anyone else. The morning sun glinted off the convention center's windows as Marcus paid the driver and stepped onto the sidewalk. He carried only his leather portfolio and smartphone. Traveling light was his signature, a habit developed over years of jetting between Silicon Valley, New York, and international tech hubs. At 43, Marcus had the confident bearing of someone who had fought his way into rooms where people like him were rarely invited. Yet the watchful eyes of someone who knew those rooms could turn hostile in an instant. "Sir, excuse me, sir," a voice called out as Marcus approached the grand entrance where attendees in business attire streamed through revolving doors. A young security guard with a crew cut and an overzealous demeanor stepped into his path. "Vendors and service personnel need to use the back entrance. It's around the side of the building." Marcus paused, his expression carefully neutral despite the familiar sting of the assumption. "I'm not a vendor. I'm an attendee." He reached for the conference badge in his pocket, the platinum level reserved for keynote speakers and industry leaders. The security guard's eyes narrowed skeptically. "Do you have proof of registration? Because all the service staff have been directed to use the east entrance." "I have my badge right here," Marcus replied, his voice measured as he displayed the platinum credential with his name and title clearly visible. 20 years in the industry, and still, the first assumption was that he couldn't possibly be an executive. The guard barely glanced at the badge. "Yeah, we've had issues with counterfeit credentials. You'll need to go around to the service entrance where they can properly verify this." A subtle tension filled the air as several onlookers slowed their pace, watching the interaction with uncomfortable curiosity. Marcus noticed a white executive breeze past them, badge only half visible, without so much as a second glance from the security staff. "I'd like to speak to your supervisor," Marcus stated calmly, though inside, a familiar fire of indignation burned. "Look, I don't want any trouble," the guard replied, hand instinctively moving toward his radio. "Just follow protocol and go to the service entrance. They'll sort it out if there's been a mistake." Marcus could have argued further, could have pulled up the conference app showing his speaker profile or the emails from Clayton Westbrook himself, CEO of Westbrook Technologies and host of the summit, personally inviting him to give the closing keynote address. But experience had taught him when to pick his battles. Sometimes, strategic retreat set the stage for a more powerful return. "Fine," Marcus said, his voice betraying none of the emotions churning beneath his composed exterior. "I'll go to the service entrance." As he walked around the building, passing dumpsters and delivery trucks, Marcus made a quick call to his assistant, Tara. "There's been a situation at the entrance. I'm heading in through the service area. Can you make sure my keynote presentation is ready to go? And Tara, make a note about this. I think we might need to address security protocols in my speech." The service entrance was a stark contrast to the grand front lobby. Concrete floors instead of marble, fluorescent lights instead of crystal chandeliers, the smell of industrial cleaning products hanging in the air. A bored-looking woman sat at a metal desk, processing deliveries and checking in catering staff. "I need verification for the conference," Marcus stated, placing his badge on the counter. The woman looked up, confusion crossing her face when she saw his platinum badge. "Sir, this is the service entrance. Attendees should go through the main lobby." "I was directed here by your front security," Marcus replied, the irony not lost on him. She examined his badge more carefully than the guard had bothered to do. Recognition flickered in her eyes. "You're Marcus Reynolds, the keynote speaker." "That's correct." Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I am so sorry, Mr. Reynolds. There's clearly been a misunderstanding. Please, let me escort you to the VIP registration area immediately. As they walked through the back corridors of the convention center, Marcus's mind wasn't on the indignity he'd just experienced. It was already calculating how to transform this moment into something meaningful. If Clayton Westbrook wanted innovation, Marcus would show him that true innovation wasn't just about technology. It was about transforming systems that allowed these misunderstandings to keep happening. The VIP registration area hummed with the energy of powerful people greeting one another like old friends. Clayton Westbrook, a tall man with silver hair and the confident posture of someone born into privilege, stood at the center of a group of admirers. At 58, Westbrook had built his company from a garage startup to a tech giant, along the way developing a reputation as brilliant but ruthless. A man who claimed to champion diversity in tech, while his company's actual hiring practices told a different story. Marcus, there you are. It was Amara Akaffer, the brilliant founder of an AI ethics platform that Horizon Ventures had funded 3 years ago. Now her company was valued at over $200 million, and she was one of the few black women to successfully break into the upper echelons of the tech world. I've been looking everywhere for you. The panel on venture funding starts in 30 minutes, and everyone's asking if you'll be there. Marcus greeted her with a warm smile, the tension from the entrance incident momentarily forgotten. I wouldn't miss it, though I had a slightly circuitous route into the building. Amara raised an eyebrow, immediately understanding the subtext. Again, at Westbrook's own conference, that man talks about inclusion in every interview but can't seem to train his staff accordingly. It's a perfect case study in the gap between stated values and operational reality, Marcus replied, his strategic mind already framing the incident as a teaching moment. Something I might address in my keynote. Well, before you take the stage and diplomatically eviscerate the industry's hypocrisy, come meet someone. Amara led him through the crowd toward a young man in his late 20s, whose confident stance couldn't quite hide his nervous energy. This is Devin Washington. He's developed an incredible facial recognition algorithm that actually works accurately for darker skin tones. Revolutionary stuff, and he's looking for seed funding. Marcus extended his hand, immediately intrigued. Facial recognition that doesn't fail for black and brown faces, that's addressing a critical gap in the market. Devin nodded eagerly. That's exactly it, sir. The current technology has error rates up to 34% higher for darker-skinned women than for light-skinned men. My algorithm reduces that disparity to less than 2%. I'd love to hear more, Marcus said, genuine interest in his voice. Are you free after the venture funding panel? As they scheduled a meeting, Marcus caught sight of Clayton Westbrook making his way toward them, his public smile firmly in place. The tech CEO had built his reputation on being a visionary, someone who could predict where technology was headed before anyone else. What most people didn't know was that 3 years earlier, Westbrook Technologies had passed on funding Devin's facial recognition startup, dismissing it as a niche solution looking for a problem. Marcus Reynolds, Westbrook said warmly, extending his hand. So glad you could make it. Your keynote is the most anticipated event of the summit. Marcus matched his professional smile with one of his own. Clayton, thank you for the invitation. It's quite a turnout. Only the best for the best, Westbrook replied smoothly. I hear Horizon Ventures has been making some impressive moves lately. That quantum computing investment was particularly bold. What Westbrook didn't say was that he'd tried to block that deal, suggesting to potential partners that a black-owned VC firm might not have the technical expertise to properly evaluate quantum technology. Marcus had not only closed the deal anyway, but had subsequently guided the company to a breakthrough that Westbrook's own R&D team had dismissed as theoretically impossible. We believe in backing vision combined with solid science, Marcus replied. Sometimes the most revolutionary ideas come from unexpected places or people. A flicker of discomfort crossed Westbrook's face before his professional mask returned. Absolutely. That's why diversity is one of our core values at Westbrook Technologies. He gestured around the room. We're always looking to expand our perspective. Marcus took in the crowd with a practiced eye, noting that despite Westbrook's claim, the executive attendance was overwhelmingly white and male. Perspective is valuable. even more so when it's reflected in leadership and investment decisions. Before Westbrook could respond, the conference director approached, urgently needing the CEO's input on a technical issue with the main stage. With a promise to continue this fascinating conversation later, Westbrook excused himself. "He has no idea what's coming, does he?" Amara murmured as they watched him walk away. Marcus smiled slightly. Few people do when their assumptions are about to be challenged. The venture funding panel proceeded predictably, with established players discussing risk tolerance and market readiness, in ways that subtly reinforced existing barriers to entry. Marcus, as the only black panelist, carefully positioned his comments to highlight how pattern recognition in venture capital often excluded innovative solutions from underrepresented founders. "When we talk about pattern recognition in identifying promising startups," he said during a discussion on evaluation metrics, "we need to ask ourselves what patterns we've been trained to recognize and which ones we might be blind to. At Horizon, we found our most successful investments often came from founders who didn't fit the traditional Silicon Valley mold." The moderator, a tech journalist known for softball questions, quickly pivoted to safer territory. "Speaking of successful investments, let's talk about your involvement with Quantum Leap Technologies. Many considered quantum computing too theoretical for serious investment just a few years ago." After the panel, Marcus found himself surrounded by eager entrepreneurs and curious investors. From the corner of his eye, he spotted the security guard who had directed him to the service entrance, now looking distinctly uncomfortable as his supervisor spoke to him in hushed but intense tones. "Marcus," a voice called, and he turned to find Alina Chen, Westbrook's chief operating officer, approaching with a carefully neutral expression. In the 3 years since she joined the company, Alina had developed a reputation as the practical executor of Westbrook's vision, and occasionally the cleaner of his messes. "Alina, good to see you again," Marcus greeted her with professional courtesy. "Likewise," she lowered her voice. "I understand there was an unfortunate incident at the entrance earlier. I want to personally apologize. That's not how we treat our distinguished guests." Marcus appreciated that she didn't try to dismiss it as a simple misunderstanding. "Thank you for acknowledging it, though I have to wonder how many others have had similar experiences without the benefit of being a keynote speaker." Alina's expression remained carefully composed, but something in her eyes suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with the company's practices either. "It's being addressed. We're conducting a full review of our security protocols." "That's good to hear," Marcus replied. "Though in my experience, these issues rarely stem from protocols alone. They're usually symptoms of deeper organizational cultures." A flash of something, recognition, perhaps, crossed Alina's face. "You may be right. Sometimes changing course requires more than just adjusting the sails." She glanced over her shoulder to where Westbrook was holding court with potential investors. "Your keynote address is scheduled for 4 p.m. Is there anything you need for your presentation?" Marcus smiled slightly. "Everything's in order. I think it will be quite illuminating." As Alina excused herself, Marcus checked his watch. He had a meeting with Devon about his facial recognition technology, then lunch with potential partners, and finally, his keynote address. The real reason he had agreed to attend this conference despite knowing exactly what kind of environment Westbrook fostered. The meeting with Devon exceeded Marcus's expectations. The young developer had not only identified a critical flaw in existing facial recognition technology, but had developed an elegant solution that could be implemented without completely rebuilding existing systems. The problem wasn't just with the training data, though that was certainly biased, Devon explained, showing Marcus the technical specifications on his tablet. It was also with how the algorithms prioritized certain facial features over others. By rebalancing those priorities and implementing what I call adaptive feature recognition, we've created a system that's more accurate across all skin tones and facial structures. Marcus was impressed. This has applications far beyond the obvious security and consumer products. Healthcare, financial services, education, anywhere identity verification matters. Devon nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. But when I pitched to Westbrook Technologies 3 years ago, they said it was too niche and questioned whether there was enough market demand to justify development costs." Their loss, Marcus said, already making mental calculations about potential investment terms. Send over your full business plan and technical documentation to this email. I'd like our team to start the due diligence process immediately. As Devon thanked him profusely, Marcus added, and if you're free at 4 p.m., I think you might find my keynote interesting. The hours before his address were filled with the usual conference networking, exchanging contacts, discussing industry trends, politely deflecting attempts by competitors to discover Horizon's next big investment target. Throughout it all, Marcus maintained his composed exterior while finalizing the mental edits to his keynote. What had started as a standard address on innovation trends was evolving into something more pointed, more necessary. At 3:30 p.m., he slipped away to the speaker's preparation room for a few moments of quiet reflection before taking the stage. The room was empty, except for a technician checking the audiovisual equipment. "All set for your presentation, Mr. Reynolds?" the young woman asked, handing him the wireless microphone. "Yes, thank you," Marcus replied, testing the microphone before clipping it to his lapel. "Though I may have made some last-minute adjustments." She smiled knowingly. "The system's all yours. Just advance the slides with this remote whenever you're ready." Left alone, Marcus scrolled through the presentation on his tablet one final time. His original talk had been titled Future Horizons, Emerging Trends in Tech Investment. The slides were still there, but the message he intended to deliver had evolved. Today wouldn't just be about technology trends. It would be about confronting the systemic issues that continued to plague the industry despite all its talk of disruption and innovation. His phone buzzed with a text from Amara. "Front row seat secured, ready to watch you make history." Marcus smiled, tucking the phone away as a conference staff member appeared at the door. "Mr. Reynolds, they're ready for you." The main auditorium was packed with over 1,000 attendees, the low hum of conversation filling the space as Marcus made his way to the side of the stage. Clayton Westbrook was at the podium, delivering his introduction. A visionary in the venture capital space, someone who has consistently identified revolutionary technologies before they became mainstream. His firm, Horizon Ventures, has one of the most impressive portfolios in the industry, with investments ranging from breakthrough medical technologies to quantum computing. Please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Marcus Reynolds. Applause filled the auditorium as Marcus walked onto the stage, exchanging a firm handshake with Westbrook before taking his position at the podium. The bright lights momentarily obscured the audience, but as his eyes adjusted, he could make out Amara in the front row, Devon a few seats away, and various industry leaders scattered throughout the crowd. In the wings, Alina Chen watched with an unreadable expression. "Thank you, Clayton, for that generous introduction," Marcus began, his voice steady and clear. "And thank you all for being here today. We've gathered at this summit to discuss innovation, to explore the cutting edge of what technology can do and how it will shape our future." He paused, surveying the sea of expectant faces. "But before we talk about the future, I'd like to share something that happened just this morning. When I arrived at this prestigious conference as a keynote speaker, I was denied entry through the main doors. Instead, I was directed to the service entrance, not because of any security concern, not because my credentials weren't in order, but because of assumptions made based on what I look like." A ripple of discomfort moved through the audience. From the corner of his eye, Marcus could see Westbrook shifting in his seat, his publicity smile frozen in place. "Now I could frame this as merely a personal inconvenience," Marcus continued, his tone measured but resolute. "But that would be a disservice to everyone in this room who believes in the power of technology to transform our world. Because what happened to me today isn't just about one security guard or one black executive. It's about the systems we build, the biases we embed in them, and the innovations we miss because of what and who we fail to see." He advanced to the first slide, showing the original title of his presentation before clicking to reveal a new one. "Blind Spots: How Technological Innovation Fails When We Exclude Diverse Perspectives." True innovation requires us to see beyond our blind spots, and the tech industry has many. Let me show you the data. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus methodically presented research showing how homogeneity in tech leadership directly correlated with missed market opportunities and flawed product development. He highlighted technologies, like early pulse oximeters that couldn't accurately read oxygen levels in darker skin, or automated soap dispensers that couldn't detect black hands, where the lack of diverse perspectives in development had led to embarrassing and sometimes dangerous failures. The cost of these blind spots isn't just moral, it's financial, Marcus emphasized, displaying a graph showing the market performance of companies with diverse leadership versus those without. Companies with diverse executive teams are 33% more likely to outperform their peers on profitability, not because diversity is a nice ideal, but because diverse perspectives catch problems and identify opportunities that homogeneous teams simply cannot see. In the audience, faces registered varying degrees of discomfort, recognition, and in some cases, dawning understanding. Marcus could see Clayton Westbrook conferring urgently with his PR director, while Alina Chen watched with what looked increasingly like approval. Now let's talk about facial recognition technology, Marcus continued, transitioning to a slide showing the error rates of current systems across different racial groups. The most widely used facial recognition algorithms today have error rates up to 34% higher for darker-skinned women than for light-skinned men. This isn't just a technical failure, it's a failure of imagination and inclusion. He paused, making eye contact with Devon in the audience. 3 years ago, a brilliant young developer approached several major tech companies, including Westbrook Technologies, with an algorithm that could dramatically reduce this disparity. He was turned away, told his solution was too niche, and that there wasn't enough market demand. Today, I'm pleased to announce that Horizon Ventures will be leading a $10 million seed round for Devon Washington's company, EqualSight Technologies. The announcement sent a buzz through the audience. Devon, in the front row, looked stunned and elated. Clayton Westbrook's expression had transformed from discomfort to something closer to alarm. But this isn't just about one investment or one technology, Marcus continued. It's about recognizing that true innovation requires us to question our assumptions, examine our biases, and intentionally include perspectives that challenge our own. And sometimes, that means admitting when we've created systems that exclude rather than include. He clicked to a new slide, displaying a quote from Clayton Westbrook's own book on innovation. The greatest breakthroughs come when we have the courage to see what others don't. I couldn't agree more with these words, Marcus said, his gaze finding Westbrook in the front row. But seeing what others don't isn't just about technological vision. It's about recognizing human potential wherever it exists, regardless of what it looks like. As Marcus moved toward his conclusion, he softened his tone slightly. I'm not standing here today to shame anyone or to suggest that I have all the answers. I'm here because I believe in the transformative power of technology and in our collective ability to do better. He looked out at the audience, making deliberate eye contact with people throughout the room. If you're watching this presentation online or following along on social media, I'd love to hear where you're watching from and your thoughts on how we can build a more inclusive tech industry. Drop a comment below and subscribe to stay engaged with this crucial conversation. The subtle call to action for viewers, seamlessly woven into his address, would resonate with online audiences without disrupting the flow for those physically present. In closing, I want to issue a challenge to myself, to Horizon Ventures, to Westbrook Technologies, and to every company represented in this room. Let's commit to innovation that truly sees everyone. Let's build technologies that work for all of us, not just some of us. And let's create corporate cultures where no one, regardless of their appearance, is ever directed to the service entrance when they deserve a place on the main stage. The silence that followed lasted only a moment before the applause began, tentative at first, then building to a crescendo. From his position on stage, Marcus could see Amara on her feet, leading what quickly became a standing ovation from much of the audience. Alina Chen was applauding as well, her expression suggesting that Marcus had articulated something she had long wanted to say herself. Clayton Westbrook's reaction was more complex, his face a mask of professional appreciation even as his eyes revealed calculation and concern. As the applause continued, he rose and approached the stage, clearly determined to regain control of the narrative. "Thank you, Marcus, for that thought-provoking address," Westbrook said as he joined Marcus at the podium, his publicity smile firmly in place though slightly strained at the edges. Your challenge is well taken. Innovation must indeed be inclusive to be truly revolutionary. Marcus nodded politely, allowing Westbrook this moment of public recovery while knowing that backstage, the real conversations would begin. As they exited the stage together, the contrast between their public cordiality and the tension beneath was palpable. In the wings, away from the audience's view, Westbrook's expression hardened. "That was quite a performance, Reynolds," he said, his voice low. "Though perhaps not the keynote I expected when I invited you." "I simply spoke the truth, Clayton," Marcus replied calmly. "Isn't that what disruption is all about? Challenging established systems that aren't working?" Before Westbrook could respond, they were surrounded by conference staff, media representatives seeking interviews, and attendees eager to speak with both men. The public setting forced Westbrook to maintain his composed facade, though Marcus could see the calculations happening behind his eyes, weighing the potential PR damage against the risk of appearing defensive. Elena Chen approached, professional but with a new undertone of respect when addressing Marcus. "That was a powerful address, Mr. Reynolds. We'd be grateful if you could join us for a private discussion afterward to explore some of the points you raised." What followed was 2 hours of intense conversation in a conference room high above the convention center floor. Present were Marcus, Clayton Westbrook, Elena Chen, and 3 members of Westbrook Technologies' board of directors who had been in the audience. What had begun as a clear attempt at damage control gradually transformed into something more substantive, as Marcus methodically presented data on how Westbrook's diversity initiatives had failed to create meaningful change within the company. "Your public commitments are admirable," Marcus acknowledged, displaying slides showing Westbrook's public statements alongside their actual hiring and promotion statistics. "But the numbers tell a different story. In the past 5 years, you've had 12 openings at the executive level. All 12 were filled by white candidates, 11 of them men. The talent pool for executive positions is limited," one board member offered defensively. "We can't find qualified, diverse candidates for these specialized roles." "With respect," Marcus countered, "that's simply not accurate. My firm maintains a database of over 5,000 highly qualified executives from underrepresented backgrounds, all with extensive experience in the tech sector. The talent isn't missing, it's being overlooked." As the discussion continued, Elena Chen emerged as an unexpected ally, corroborating Marcus's points with internal data she had clearly been collecting for some time. "Our retention rates for employees of color are 43% lower than for white employees," she noted. "Exit interviews consistently cite lack of advancement opportunities and an unwelcoming culture as primary reasons for leaving." By the meeting's 3rd hour, the mood had shifted dramatically. Clayton Westbrook, realizing that the board members were increasingly convinced by Marcus's presentation, made a calculated pivot from defense to collaborative problem-solving. "Clearly, we have work to do," he conceded, his tone suggesting he was now taking charge of addressing a problem he had just discovered rather than one his company had perpetuated. "What would you suggest as concrete next steps, Marcus?" Marcus was prepared for this question. "First, bring in independent auditors to conduct a thorough review of your hiring, promotion, and retention practices. Second, establish clear metrics for improvement with timelines and accountability measures. Third, create a senior executive position focused exclusively on transforming your corporate culture, with direct reporting to the board." The discussion continued well into the evening, with the board members increasingly engaged and Westbrook grudgingly acknowledging the necessity of change only to protect the company's reputation and market position. As the meeting finally concluded, Marcus prepared to leave for his delayed flight home. In the elevator down to the lobby, he found himself alone with Clayton Westbrook. "You could have just given the keynote we expected," Westbrook said, his tone a mixture of irritation and reluctant respect. "Why take this approach?" Marcus considered his response carefully. "Because sometimes meaningful change requires a moment of uncomfortable truth. Your company has the potential to lead the industry in more than just technology, Clayton, but leadership requires courage, the courage to acknowledge failures and commit to doing better." The elevator reached the lobby, its doors opening to reveal the now quiet convention center. "My security chief has been terminated," Westbrook said abruptly as they stepped out. And we'll be implementing a complete overhaul of our conference admittance procedures. That's a start, Marcus acknowledged. But as I think today made clear, the issue goes deeper than one security guard or one incident. Westbrook was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its defensive edge. The board wants to create an advisory committee on inclusion and innovation. They've asked if you would consider chairing it. Marcus raised an eyebrow, surprised by the request, but immediately recognizing it as both an opportunity and a strategic move by Westbrook to control the narrative. I'd need to see a concrete commitment to implementing the committee's recommendations, with clear metrics and accountability measures. Of course, Westbrook replied quickly, too quickly. We're fully committed to meaningful change. Marcus smiled slightly. Then I look forward to seeing that commitment in writing. My legal team will review any proposal you send over. As they reached the front entrance, the same entrance where Marcus had been turned away that morning, Westbrook extended his hand. Despite our differences, I respect what you did today. It took conviction. Marcus shook his hand firmly. Conviction is just the beginning. Real change takes consistent action over time. I'll be watching to see if Westbrook Technologies is ready to lead that change or content to just talk about it. Outside, the evening air was cool against his face as Marcus waited for his car. His phone buzzed with a text from Amara. You just changed the game. Drinks to celebrate when you're back in town. Before he could reply, another message came through, this one from Devon, Washington. Mr. Reynolds, I don't know how to thank you. 3 years of rejection, and now everything's changed overnight. When can we meet to discuss next steps? As Marcus typed his responses, he reflected on the day's events. One keynote address wouldn't transform an industry built on deeply entrenched biases and exclusionary practices, but it had created an opening, a moment where uncomfortable truths could no longer be ignored or dismissed. What happened next would depend on whether companies like Westbrook Technologies were truly willing to examine their blind spots or simply looking for the quickest path back to business as usual. His car arrived, and as he settled into the back seat, Marcus made a note to call the Horizon Ventures legal team first thing in the morning. If Westbrook was serious about the advisory committee, Marcus wanted the terms to be ironclad, with real authority and accountability measures that couldn't be easily circumvented. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Good day at the conference, sir. Marcus smiled slightly. Let's just say it was illuminating. Sometimes the most important innovation isn't a new technology, it's a new perspective. As the car pulled away from the Westbrook Convention Center, Marcus's phone rang with a call from Elena Chen. He answered, curious about what Westbrook's COO might want to discuss away from her boss's watchful eye. Mr. Reynolds, she began, her voice more relaxed than it had been during the meeting. I wanted to thank you privately for what you did today. Some of us have been trying to address these issues internally for years, but without the leverage to make real change happen. I appreciate that, Elena, Marcus replied, though I suspect the coming weeks will determine whether today was a turning point or just a momentary disruption. About that, she said, lowering her voice slightly. The board members were more affected by your presentation than Westbrook wants to admit. They've called an emergency session for tomorrow morning. I think you may have set something significant in motion. Marcus considered this information carefully. Board intervention could potentially accelerate the changes he'd advocated for, or lead to superficial adjustments designed to address public perception rather than underlying issues. Keep me posted, he said, and if you need any additional data or perspective for that meeting, don't hesitate to reach out. After ending the call, Marcus stared out the window at the city lights scrolling past. The tech industry loved to talk about disruption, about challenging established systems, and transforming the status quo. But that enthusiasm for disruption rarely extended to examining the industry's own exclusionary practices and biases. His phone buzzed again with a news alert. Westbrook Technologies stock dips following controversial conference keynote. Marcus wasn't surprised. The markets often reacted negatively to any suggestion that a company might need to change its practices, even when those changes were clearly necessary for long-term sustainability. By morning, the story had evolved. His keynote had gone viral on social media, with clips of his most pointed challenges being shared widely. Tech blogs were publishing analyses, industry leaders were issuing statements, and Westbrook Technologies was frantically trying to control the narrative with press releases emphasizing their commitment to diversity and inclusion. When Marcus landed back in San Francisco, Tara was waiting with updates. "Your schedule is completely booked for the next 2 weeks," she informed him as they walked to the car. "Every major tech publication wants an interview. 3 universities have invited you to give commencement addresses, and the governor's office called about appointing you to a state commission on technological equity." Marcus nodded, taking in the information. "And what about Horizon's investments? Any fallout there?" Tara smiled. "Quite the opposite. 2 pension funds that were on the fence about increasing their allocation to our newest fund called this morning to confirm their participation. And Devin Washington's preliminary due diligence is already looking promising. His technology tests better than anything else on the market." As they drove toward the Horizon Ventures offices, Marcus's phone rang again. The caller ID showed Clayton Westbrook's private number. "Marcus," Westbrook's voice was tense when he answered. "We need to talk. The board meeting just concluded." "I'm listening," Marcus replied neutrally. There was a pause, and when Westbrook spoke again, his tone had changed. Less commanding CEO, more humbled executive. "The board has decided to implement all 3 of your recommendations, effective immediately. They've also," he hesitated, "they've also voted to create a new position, Chief Inclusion and Innovation Officer, reporting directly to the board. They want to offer you the role." Marcus was genuinely surprised. This was far more than the advisory committee previously discussed. "That's unexpected." "For both of us," Westbrook admitted, a hint of bitterness in his voice. "The board feels that your experience and visibility would send a powerful message about our commitment to change. The position would be part-time, allowing you to maintain your role at Horizon while helping to transform Westbrook Technologies." Marcus immediately recognized the complexity of the offer. Taking the position would give him unprecedented influence to implement the changes he'd advocated for. But it would also potentially tie his reputation to Westbrook's ability to truly transform its culture, a process that would inevitably face resistance and setbacks. "I'll need to see the details of the proposal," Marcus said carefully, "including explicit authority, resource allocation, and performance metrics." "Of course," Westbrook replied quickly. "Elena is preparing the formal offer now, but Marcus," his voice lowered, "I want you to know that despite yesterday's confrontation, I respect what you're trying to do. This industry has talked about diversity for decades without making real progress. Maybe it's time for a different approach." The sincerity in Westbrook's voice was unexpected. Whether it was genuine reflection or simply a CEO's survival instinct, something had shifted. "Send over the proposal," Marcus said. "And Clayton, if we do this, it won't be easy. Real transformation never is, but it could establish a new standard for the industry." After ending the call, Marcus sat back in his seat, processing the rapid developments of the past 24 hours. What had begun as a routine keynote address had catalyzed what could potentially be a significant shift for one of the industry's most influential companies. "Good news?" Tara asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. "Interesting news," Marcus replied. "It seems Westbrook Technologies wants to do more than just damage control." As they pulled up to the Horizon Ventures building, Marcus made a decision. Whether he accepted Westbrook's offer or not, the momentum created by his keynote needed to be channeled into broader industry change. One company wasn't enough. The entire ecosystem needed transformation. "Tara, I want to schedule a meeting with our communications team," he said as they walked into the building. "It's time to launch that industry consortium we've been discussing, bringing together VCs, founders, and established companies committed to measurable progress on inclusion in tech. And reach out to Amara and Devin as well. I think they should be involved from the beginning." 24 hours earlier, Marcus had been directed to the service entrance of a conference where he was the keynote speaker. Now, he had the opportunity to help redefine how one of tech's major players approached innovation and inclusion, and potentially to influence the industry at large. Real change wouldn't come from one keynote or one new executive position. It would come from sustained pressure, measurable accountability, and a willingness to center voices that had been relegated to the margins for too long. The road ahead would be challenging, but as Marcus stepped into the Horizon Ventures offices, he felt something he hadn't expected to feel after the previous day's confrontation: hope. The next 6 months unfolded in ways that surprised even Marcus. What had begun as a pointed keynote address transformed into a movement within the tech industry, one that demanded more than statements and promises. Under Marcus's part-time leadership as Chief Inclusion and Innovation Officer, Westbrook Technologies implemented structural changes that initially caused discomfort among long-time executives, but gradually began to shift the company's culture. The independent audit Marcus had insisted upon revealed patterns of bias more pervasive than even he had suspected. Armed with this data, he instituted new hiring and promotion practices, mentorship programs, and accountability metrics tied to executive compensation. Clayton Westbrook, initially resistant, gradually became an unexpected ally, his competitive nature driving him to want to be seen as a leader in this transformation rather than a reluctant participant. Devon Washington's facial recognition company, with Horizon's backing, grew rapidly, attracting attention from government agencies and businesses worldwide. The technology that had once been dismissed as too niche was now being hailed as a breakthrough in ethical AI development. Amara Akafer joined forces with Marcus to launch the Inclusive Innovation Consortium, bringing together venture capital firms, startups, and established tech companies committed to measurable diversity goals and transparent reporting. Within months, what had started as a small coalition had grown to include over 50 significant industry players. The security guard who had directed Marcus to the service entrance, a young man named Jason Miller, reached out with a heartfelt apology. Rather than dismissing him, Marcus invited him to participate in one of the new training programs being developed at Westbrook, using their interaction as a case study in how unconscious bias manifests in everyday situations. Jason eventually became one of the program's most effective facilitators, sharing his own journey of recognition and growth. Not everything went smoothly. There was backlash from corners of the industry that viewed any focus on inclusion as a distraction from pure meritocracy. Some executives left Westbrook rather than adapt to the new expectations. Certain investors questioned whether Horizon Ventures was becoming too focused on social issues rather than. The quarterly reports showed their diversified portfolio consistently outperforming market averages. Through it all, Marcus maintained his focus on systemic change rather than individual blame. His approach wasn't about punishing past failures, but creating new patterns for future success. Patterns that recognized innovation could come from anywhere when barriers to participation were removed. 1 year after the keynote that had gone viral, Marcus stood on a different stage, this one at Horizon Ventures' annual investors conference. The audience before him represented trillions in investment capital, with the power to shape which technologies would receive funding and which would remain unrealized potential. "A year ago," Marcus began, "I challenged our industry to acknowledge its blind spots, to recognize that true innovation requires diverse perspectives. Today, I can report that change is happening, though not as quickly or completely as needed." He displayed slides showing the progress made by companies that had joined the Inclusive Innovation Consortium, improvements in hiring and retention, increases in funding for diverse founders, and most significantly, market advantages gained through more inclusive product development processes. "The data is increasingly clear," Marcus continued. "Companies that embrace diverse leadership aren't just doing the right thing morally, they're doing the smart thing strategically. They catch flaws in products before they reach market. They identify opportunities others miss. They build technologies that work for everyone, not just some of us." In the front row, Clayton Westbrook nodded in agreement, a gesture that would have seemed inconceivable a year earlier. Beside him sat Alina Chen, recently promoted to president of Westbrook Technologies after her pivotal role in transforming the company's practices. "But our work is far from finished," Marcus acknowledged, displaying new statistics on the persistent gaps in venture funding and executive representation. "We've made progress, but the harder challenges still lie ahead." As he concluded his address, Marcus recalled the moment a year earlier when he had been directed to a service entrance, a small indignity that had catalyzed a larger movement for change. One incident hadn't transformed an industry, but it had created an opening for conversations that had been too long deferred. The standing ovation that followed his closing remarks wasn't just for Marcus. It was for every person who had pushed for change when it would have been easier to accept the status quo. For Devon, whose brilliant innovation had initially been dismissed. For Amara, who had built a successful company despite the barriers placed in her way. For Alina, who had worked from within to transform a resistant corporate culture. And perhaps most importantly, for the next generation of innovators who would enter an industry still imperfect but increasingly aware of its blind spots, and increasingly committed to addressing them. As Marcus stepped away from the podium, his phone buzzed with a message from Tara. White House called. The president wants to appoint you to lead a national commission on equity in technology. Call when you can. Marcus smiled slightly as he tucked the phone away. The work continued, one conversation, one policy, one company at a time. True innovation wasn't just about developing new technologies. It was about ensuring those technologies served everyone equally. It was about recognizing that the path to the future needed to be wide enough for all of us to walk it together, with no one directed to the service entrance when they deserved a place on the main stage.